Hello, everyone. Welcome to Earth Central, the podcast of Orbify that we invite sustainability experts to talk about sustainability subjects. Today we have Pascal with us, the co-founder of Morfo, and I'm very excited that you're here, and I'm very excited to have a very in-depth conversation about what you do and what are your goals and your ambitions and your missions. So, would you like to give us a small introduction about yourself and what you do with Morfo and everything about you also? That would be great.
Sure, with pleasure. Starting with me, so I'm Pascal, I'm 27 years old, so I'm one of the three co-founders of Morfo with Hugo, who is my brother, and Adrien, who I studied with, I think, 10 years ago now. I grew up in French Guyana, which is like a French department just over Brazil. And so it's in the middle of the tropical rainforest Amazon, in the Amazon. And so we grew up with this really, we were incentivized, at least like our parents were really sensitive to the forests and like what we can do great about the forest, but what harm we can do as well as humans on the forest. And so we really grew up with this deep link with tropical forest and even more with the Amazon. And so what we do today is not from nowhere. So growing up, like just in a nutshell, but I say we with my brother, we did a lot of swimming. So it was like all our life, like from 6 to 9 times a week, 2 hours in the morning at 6 in the morning. And then like after school, we were going as well. So that this is a big part of our life. And I think in the culture of the company that we have today, like that's really something that we can feel about, like, the adaptability, the resilience that we can feel because we spend so many hours just swimming, checking the swimming pool from like all the parts. And so, yeah, many hours on that. And so today that's something that we can feel developing the company. The task is big. We have to make some kind of revolution that has the same magnitude of the industrial revolution or the digital revolution that we had 20 years ago. Now it has to happen with nature. And we know that it's big, but we have like, this motivation and we know that we can do it. So thanks mostly with this part of our childhood. So this is a big part of what we did. And then like I studied and I went to a business school in France, in Lyon. Had an amazing time here, met many people and opening the ideas. And then like I created the first company before. It was more about, it was a legal tech, so helping entrepreneurs on their legal life, let's say, to automate and make their life way easier. And then like, this topic of forest was still there. Yeah. And then it started to come up from the depth of the water. And we talked with Hugo about this topic, saying, okay, we are seeing that governments are talking about that. You have many NGOs that are doing a fantastic job on this topic. Even companies are starting to talk about this topic, and the general opinion has an opinion on this, and like it's part of like the importance of what's occurring now. Nature has its importance now, and we need to do something. And so we are seeing that we knew French Guiana, we knew that the potential, but French Guiana is big like that. When you have like just Brazil next to it, that is a full continent. And so we are thinking, okay, taking a step back, what's the problem with forest? What's the problem with nature now, and what can we do? And so you can see that there are 900 million hectares of forests, of past forests, of degraded lands that are ready to be restored without impacting human activities. It's huge. Right. And the UN said, okay, we have 10 years to do that. It was in 2020. We have 10 years to restore that. But we are really far from it. We are like at the pace of like 5 million per year, counting like the natural regeneration. And we should be at 100. So if we reach the 5% at the end of the 2030, it would be huge. So how can we do first to restore forest with the biodiversity? Because monoculture is not a good solution. Yeah. How can we imply and include all the local population in this project? Because the same, if you don't include them, your project won't last. But then how can we make sure that we increase the pace of this restoration, of this forest restoration? And so this all started with this and saying, okay, we need to do things right, and then we need to do things fast. And then, like, I think we'll get more deeper into this, but we had the idea of these seed pods that we can put into drones, and these drones can fly over the field and then start this natural regeneration, and then making sure that it's happening. And so having this follow-up with soil samplings and drone analysis to make sure that every 3 months, every 6 months, we are seeing what's happening, what's evolving, how much biomass is coming back, how much biodiversity is coming back, to make sure that we have this forest coming back to life.
I have like many questions, to be honest, because for me, what you do is something very impressive. I have questions also from the sustainability side, but also from curiosity about nature. So I'm going to start with two questions, and you can separate them or you can combine them at one. First of all, why do you think now is the time that people care about nature? Do you think it's because people are starting to get more desperate because of the climate change and we see the effects and now suddenly everybody talks about that? And the second question is, can you walk me through a day on a field? Like, can you tell me what exactly you do?
Sure. So the first part about, let's say, the care of nature, we have a great example. Like, my father was a gold miner. And so all his generation was about gold mining. So it was the dream, you know. He went to this, what we call in Brazil, the Serra Pelada, which was the gold rush. So everybody was going there because you could encounter success doing that. Yeah. And so you have all this generation where it was not about degrading forest. It was about like finding this mineral and being successful thanks to that. And so I think that it's really great for me to see that as an intergenerational thing, since my father didn't want to harm nature, but he wanted to make something of his life, and he had this amazing opportunity around gold. Right. And so when you think about that, he saw during like 40 years, harming, degrading lands to make his activities. But then at the end, he had to restore nature. And you know, the more you go, the more he was going, he was seeing that it didn't just like cut the trees where he needed to exploit, but that cutting these trees at the exact location was harming way more than just this space. You know, the food ecosystem around was getting harmed. And so like he started understanding that. And I think having two children, he understood as well. And he was saying, I think I was like 3 to 4 years old, telling me, okay, I think that my generation did a lot of shit, but you'll have to do something to repair. And I think it's like a great, I like to see it this way, because the past generation made many things to harm nature. And we have this role, our generation, to make sure that we can repair. That's our challenge for our generation. Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's more, this kind of generational thing, and having, of course, the voice of scientists getting like more important. And I think that's a good thing. Putting the alarm on, okay, guy, we cannot just keep this situation going on like this. Otherwise, we won't have any human conditions viable on this planet. So how can we today, and like as fast as we can, as soon as possible, create the conditions where like in 20 years, 50 years, we will be able to live quite in a normal life. And so, and so there are many different solutions. And I think that what is good with forest is that we all have some kind of link with a forest, because you had some park or square next to your apartment. You had like some forest or some, I don't know, big park around you. And so it talks to you when I say, okay, you like, what's your favorite tree? You have like some kind of tree coming to your mind. And I think that's a good thing about what we do, is that you can feel this link. And the closer you feel to something, the easiest is to say, okay, it's important, not only for me, but for like the planet. So that would be a part. I think it's a really great question, and we could spend 1 hour talking about why is there
can go
more
so
interest
deep inside also
in nature,
but and everything.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, what we see today is that it's like one of the greatest worry on population. I think that in France, it's now like the top worry of like the French population of climate change. People care about it, and then of course care about the solutions, because when you talk about solutions, you talk about hope. I think that's a big part of what we do as well. It's like giving hope, showing solutions, and hoping that many other people will join let's say the fight. I don't really talk about the fight, but join the movement to say, okay, we'll find solutions to make sure that in 2100 we'll have a great planet. So that would be the first the answer to the first question. And the second one was about the daily life on a Morfo project.
Walk me through that.
You have to imagine that there are sure. There are 4 main steps in every Morfo project. the first one is like, it's even before, but when we have identified the project, and so we have usually a partner, so it can be a customer, like a company, it can be an NGO, it can be a public collectivity organization. When we have the field, we go to the field and we make these soil samples. We make the drone analysis. We take some like satellite picture, but for us, it's like we don't really use it. I think that there are great people like Orbify working on satellites, and that's really the complementary work. But we are more on this like soil and drone analysis. From that, we are sending the samplings to our laboratories, the soil samplings, where we make all the analysis to understand how is the soil. We make it match with the drone analysis. And from that, from this diagnosis that we have, we're going to the second step, which is the planning. And what is the planning? Is what are the species that we want to implement in this project, on what kind of soils, and what part of this project, because it won't be like just like this scheme for the full project. It will be divided in many parts, in many parts of the project. And so what are the species that we'll use? And so it's like at least 10 species. We go up to 50 species. Usually it's between like 10 to 30 species. And what will be the components, the composition of the seed pods, so that we can make sure what the seed pods is for, is to protect the seed, feed the seed, nourish, and feed the soil as well, that are usually really degraded when we operate. And so all this part of planning is, okay, what will we plant? When will we plant? Because we are working in close collaboration with nature. So we won't like pour water on every seed that we plant. So we need to make sure that we are at the right period, the right season of the year to restore. And how we'll make it, like what are all the methods that we'll use, extra. So this is the second part of the planning of the full project that is occurring in our offices. Then the third part is to go on the field. So then when we go on the field, we take all the seeds, we take all the seed pods, like seeds and seed pods that we've created in the previous steps. We take all the raw materials needed. We take our drones. So usually we take 2 drones to the field, or depending on the size, but like for now, we take 2 drones to the field with like 2 people that are our forest engineers, and they're going. And then, we have like pre-programmed schemes. So the drone knows how to do, knows what to do.
Okay.
We just have to click to feel the drones, and it's flying. And then let's say pouring or dispersing all these seed pods around the field, and doing like approximately 30 to it's up to 50 hectares per day.
Wow.
Which is like amazing compared to these traditional methods where one human can do 0.5 to 1 hectare if it's like really running somebody that can run fast. But it's maximum 1 hectare per day. So with one drone, we are able to multiply this space, having this security as well, because there are many parts you cannot access, and if you access, you can take risk. And so the human part is quite important. And being able as well to reduce the prices, as this is a market that on some parts, the price will be really important to make sure that we can scale. And it's not really, it's not just a scale, it's like really about hyper scaling, because we have 900 million hectares to do. Nowadays, you see like projects of 1,000, 10,000, but not many more, a lot more. So how will we be able to hyperscale this market? And technologies are a part, and prices will be too. It would be crossing the two that will work really well.
But then,
so this is the third part. And once we finished this dispersing, we have this 4th step of monitoring. And so every 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, we're going to the field and doing the same as the diagnosis, soil sampling analysis, flying drone analysis, and then we are monitoring the key elements of biodiversity, biomass, and then carbon sequestration. And this is then occurring on many years, since we want to make sure that the project is actually opening. What is the biodiversity that we see? Because we restore it, we want to protect it. And then started.
Are you also giving this data to the project developers so they can actually know how their field is progressing, and then they can actually apply, I don't know, for carbon credits or different way that they can also monetize, their land in a way? Or what is your main client?
Yeah, so for us, it's really a tool that we develop to make sure we can monitor the forest, and developing our ways of calculating carbon with the best accuracy but for now we are not like certifying any of this data. It's like all the
Okay.
models and the algorithm that we are using, and we put it at disposal of our like partners and customers. But for now, it's like really to make sure you can monitor the forest growing. Many things can be done with all that, and I think we'll have many discussions in the coming months and years. But for now, it's really like a tool as much as the clients as for us to understand what did work well and what did work less, because we have to be clear that not everybody is working 100%, and so how we can make sure that we improve all our systems as well.
And why drones? I mean, I get that they're faster and you can like, dispose all these like seeds in a way bigger scale and faster, but at the same time, how you came up with this? I mean, or not exactly you, but how Morfo came up with the idea of drones? Like, what was the main inspirations to go for drones?
So the first idea, like, was how can you scale these operations? So you have two options. Either you hire like 10,000 people to go on your field and to make sure that you can deploy this project, or like our generation is more part of like all these technologies that we've seen. There were many experiments with helicopters, with planes trying to do that, but then the accuracy was not that good and the price was really high. And then on the last years, we've seen amazing improvements with drones, and that's just like crossing these ideas of planes and helicopters. And we've seen like a company from UK and Australia that's starting doing that. And so we're like, okay, we need to deep dive in this concept, because we think that it can really be applied to all these tropical regions where we want to deploy projects, and even more to restore this forest. And so it was like first in terms of efficiency, but then when we deep dive into the seed pods, you can see that your survival rates are at least the same or higher than the seedlings, but then you're going way faster, and then you can do it like cheaper. So everything was like seemed perfect.
Better.
Of course, it was not that easy to develop the full system. But it seemed really good and quite ambitious. So we wanted to go in this direction.
And I want to because I know how you connected with the nature, and you described also about your childhood and how you're connected with it. I would like to know one project. You don't have to name it, but just tell me one time that you actually managed to restore a forest, and then you've been there, or you've seen the field, or you actually had pictures of it, and you actually felt this that yes, I'm providing a real impact, and I'm actually with my business really helping this planet go forward. Do you have any case study or any real story to share with us?
Yeah. We have really two great examples of these ones, because I've been at the planting time and then coming back to see what happened after. And the first one, which is like the really beginning of 2022. The other one was in January 2023. So one is 2 years old, one is a bit like 1.5 years old. And when you see 2 years ago, it was 2.5 years ago, like the means that we had that back at that day were not the same. We were like the three co-founders, we had the really first thing, and we deployed this project. It was kind of a bet with many scientific people backing us and extra. So we knew that it was not nothing, but it was quite a mess. It's the beginning. And you deploy this, it's degraded. So it's like nothing is like sand or gravel or thing. You cannot expect a forest to grow after that, since it has been like 10 to 15 years that nothing happened. And then you come back 2 years later and you have trees like 2 meters high, 3 meters high from this sand. So from nothing. And you're like, okay, that's what I do. And that's why I do that every day. And of course you feel, but even more that you feel that you bring back life on this place. And there are some spaces, like some lands, you feel that it could be Mars, but not it's like Mars, it's the Earth, and then you are able to restore life there. And we had another, this was in French Guiana, and the second one was in Brazil, in the state of Bahia. And it's the same, like it has been like 15 years, nothing happened. So 15 years the land was there. Before it was sugarcane exploitation. Then the soils were too poor. So the landowner said, okay, we stopped doing anything there. And then we met him and said, okay, we can do a project together. And then we planted 1.5 years ago. And now we came back three months earlier. And you have things like bigger than me.
Wow.
And it's like,
that should be a great feeling.
Life is coming back. Yeah. And even something that you feel even greater is that you have like this biodiversity. We've seen already like 19 19 out of 24 species that already thrive and that are already growing. So, it's really like the beginning of this new forest that will occur.
Yeah.
And I think that I'll be like completely crazy in like 20 years when it will be like a full forest with all these monkeys and birds, everything. So this will be the best part, but waiting for that. Already you can see that it's growing, and you have like 2 meter, 3 meter trees. And yeah, that's a really great feeling to know like we spend a lot of time behind our computers, but then like the real effect is on the field, and that we can see and check this on the field. So yeah, that's a great part.
And this is like such an important like message in a way, because we both work in climate tech. Many people work in climate tech right now, and that's a great industry and a great field. But I think the most great thing about climate tech is actually the results. It's actually what you can see afterwards. It's actually what you can say that, look, this earth is actually safe because of what I did. And this is, I think, the motivation for everybody working in climate tech to actually do better and do more. It's just to help the planet. And that's amazing. And I cannot even imagine the feeling of going back there and seeing the forest that, you planted. But change the angle, but not for much. I just want to say that in every good story, there is also something negative. So I would like to know what challenges you've been through to build Morfo, and what challenges you're going through right now. And is it about maybe the local communities, or about the technology, or about the nature? What is the main challenge you're dealing with?
I think, like, of course, as we want to build like, a global leader in forest restoration, and that we start from quite nothing, it's new technologies, it's new method. There are challenges absolutely everywhere. And there are many good news, but of course there are like many challenges that we face like all the time. So I think the first thing is that, we've created this new methodology, these seed pods, everything. And of course, like, you don't have 100% positive result. Even more because we are working with nature. And so,
Right.
Yes, last year there were amazing droughts, like bad droughts in Brazil. So it makes our project harder to thrive. But then that's something that we have, like, how can you make a positive note of these bad events? And so, like, the one of the effect of the seed pod is to resist to drought. And we've seen that it worked quite well. But that it harmed as well the project. And so the result that we were expecting because of the droughts were lower than expected. And so, it's always and how can you like make a positive note on that? Getting the best results on the field is one of our main challenge. On the result itself, so on this scientific part, and so that's a challenge that we have every day, and that's why we have laboratories here, that's why we have laboratories in Brazil, and that's why we are investing so much in science, in our scientists and researchers here, but as well with public laboratories. So that's one of the main challenge we have. The second big challenge we have is to scale our operations, because we start with like dozens of hectares, then we are going to hundreds of hectares, but then quickly we have to go to 10,000 to hundreds thousand of hectares. And this is like, first to make sure that what you build first can be replicated and can be deployed on way bigger project, and bigger scale, and to make sure that we can replicate all the processes that we are creating from scratch. And like going to the from scratch to the hyperscale thing, you have many steps, and we are going through that phase, like solidifying our foundations to make sure that we can scale them. That's as well an everyday challenge. There will be a last challenge that we have is, of course, our customers or partners are usually big organizations, and we are a small organization. Our pace is really fast, and we don't have the same speed, the same pace as these organizations. So when we want to sign all the contracts in 3 weeks, they need 9 months for that. And like making sure that we are accepting, it's not really accepting, but let's say that, accepting their rhythm and making sure that we can still go forward with their rhythm as well is quite a challenge. So this commercial challenge is always something when you work with these big corporations or like big collectivities or big NGOs.
And what about the local communities? Because I realized that by going to restore a forest, you also have to face the local communities. And as you said before, without engaging the local communities, the projects are usually not developing that well. How do you engage them? Or are you engaging the local communities? Or are you hiring them? Or how you work with them?
So this is a huge part that we
I get it.
Deep dive into this. So we have like many steps in which like the local communities have to be engaged because it makes the project like more successful. The really first one is how do you get your supply? How do you get your seeds? And the people who know and the people who go to collect the seeds are these local communities. And usually you always take this native species, so you need the seed collectors to be around. So that's the first part where we work with them to like present the project and make sure that they are engaged with us on this supply. And this is like, I said it quite simply, but it's something absolutely huge and amazing. And it's one of the best parts of our project is this part. But I do it like quite simple and quick. The second part is that we usually work with local NGOs because we have some parts that we book a reserve for traditional planting, because there are some soils, there are some conditions where the traditional methods are is the best method to do it. And so we work with local NGOs that are used to do that. And these local NGOs have a great anchor in these lands or in these regions, and they work with this local population. And usually they make the bridge really with the local population talking about the projects. And they usually hire people when it's time for the traditional plantation. And then when talking about the monitoring, like sometimes we go to the field to make all the drones analysis, but for the frequent analysis, the soil and field analysis, we are working with this local population, and we hire like 1 or 2 people to make sure we can work with them and they can go to the field and monitor it. And we have this example of with the grandson of a farmer that is living next to our project in Bahia, that is going like every week on the field and he's sending pictures to us when there are changes or things. And so it's always a part of how do you just collaborate and make sure that your project is really being implemented in this region, not being forced and pushed, but as an ecosystem that like it comes in symbiosis with the rest of the ecosystem and of the region.
Have you ever had some examples where the local community was kind of against to your project? That they were not really, a huge fan of what you're trying to do? So
we didn't have it for yet. And I cross the fingers so that it doesn't happen. But for now, as we were really careful about all these steps and making sure that we don't want to do any mess. Yeah, for now, everything is okay.
Okay, that's important. That's good to know. And I would like to know also about the local wildlife, because apart from the biodiversity, we talk also about animals, and we talk about, as you said, like in 10, 20 years, you may go and see monkeys there. How do you plan that? How do you organize that by choosing the specific seeds?
So that's as well a big topic, since usually that there's this virtuous circle where animals can bring the seeds and the seeds will bring animals, right. And the more you go, the more you get. And so for us, for now, of course, we focused mainly on this flora biodiversity, but you have to think and to anticipate that there will be this wildlife coming back. And so there will be ways for us to monitor that, with the sounds, with the images, but that's a bit early for us for now. And there are some strategic species where, in some regions that can bring some kinds of birds or some kinds of animals that will bring more flora biodiversity. And so we have this kind of strategic species. And, when we choose the species, now we have 300 species in the catalog. Wow. When we choose the species, there are 15 criteria before deploying on the field. And if they tick all the criteria, then we'll put them on the field on our project. Okay. And some kind of criteria are linked with this wildlife and their capacity of bringing back wildlife in the project.
Impressive, all of it. I would like to know if any carbon buyers is actually approaching you to use your services in order to monitor some land, to make sure that the land is actually transparent enough to be a good project. Or if you don't have any connection with buyers, you just focus on developers.
Yeah, so at the very beginning, we wanted to talk to the full value chain of the carbon markets. And then we understood that our strength was how to implement all the projects to the field. Because we see that there are so many lands, there is a lot of money that is being deployed, but then there's a problem in how can you make sure that the projects are successful and to deploy them. And so we started to talk with carbon buyers, but then we stopped saying, okay, now we focus on this compliance market when you have companies that have to restore their lands, and otherwise on the voluntary carbon markets to talk directly to carbon project developers. So we give them the tools, but we are not talking directly to these carbon buyers.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And I would like to know also about Morfo when it comes to the long-term goals that you have. let's say, how do you see yourself in Morfo and Morfo as a company in 10 years? Not if, I mean, 10 is maybe too much for startups right now. Let's say 5 years.
I think, like the thing is that we've started this journey knowing that we wanted to restore 100 million hectares by 2050. And everything that we do, even when it's like 20 hectares or 50 hectares, we have this objective in mind, saying, okay, today it's like, okay, 1,000 hectares this year. It will be like, I don't know how many millions per year in 2050. And so, like, I think there won't be any like big change every year, but it will be a fast-paced changing environment going to these 100 million hectares in 2050. So in 5 years, everything will be, this foundation will be set up, and we will have scale a lot. The team will be bigger, but then, I want this to be smooth. There won't be any breaking. There won't be anything violent. It will be a smooth evolution. People will join. It's like like a forest growing. The forest will grow, and it will be like this forest growing with all these people joining. And in 5 years, it will be this growing forest of not 5 years, it will be 8 years. And then when the forest will be 50 years, it will be, 1,000 people company with like millions of hectares of growing forest. And but that's how I imagine the future of Morfo and how things will evolve.
And how you feel about drones? How do you think they're going to develop in the next years?
About drones?
Drones, yeah.
I think that will improve the way that we can deploy them, so their capacity, their autonomy. And the idea for us, today we have one pilot for one drone, and the idea is how we can get to five drones with one pilot. How can we push the autonomy, the automation of these drones to its maximum, so that one pilot will be able to restore up to 250 hectares per day, which is like, it's nonsense if you imagine. But then when you have this scale of one pilot, 250 hectares, then you can say, okay, restoring this 100 million hectares or restoring these 1 billion hectares of the world's forest will be possible. And yeah, exactly. It's conceivable. So all what we do is to create all this method and to make sure that it won't be any Morfo using this technique. We want the full world and all the NGOs and new companies being created that will be able to use the technologies that we are developing. Because it would be absurd for us to develop technology and say, okay, it's just ours. We want to make sure that our impact gets way bigger by sharing the technologies that we develop.
I would like to ask one more question. What is the main advice you would give to companies that they want to restore their forests?
I think that's hard advice that we've received, but I think it's one of the most important, even more talking about forest, it's a quote. It's like, time does not respect what is done without it. And so when you want to do things too fast, then you'll misstep and then you'll make huge mistakes. And I think that we have this idea of like, we are a startup, becoming scale up. We want to do things fast, but we want to do things right. And so sometimes you have to accept, when you have laboratories where plants are growing, when you have forests growing on the field, that things are not that fast and that you have to accept it. And that's part of the journey. And as we are running all the time, accepting that sometimes you have to walk is hard, but it would be one of the best advice that I
think that's not just for people who want to restore their forest. I think that's an advice that everybody could get and use it in, different aspects of their life. And now it's like a small tradition when it comes to Orbify podcast. In the end of every Orbify podcast, we call it like the inspirational ideas and values that you would like to share as a closing statement of this podcast. Something that you would like to stay in this podcast, and every time you're going to listen back to it, to remember that, I said that as the last thing there. So tell us something that you would like to share.
No, I think that's something that I usually have in mind when coming to the office, is that we're quite waking up every morning with like this weird feeling of not knowing if the planet will be like viable. That's what we are saying at the beginning, but if the planet will be viable in 50 years or 100 years. And I think that's why I wake up every morning, is to make sure that in 100 years, we'll just laugh at what was climate change and saying, okay, can you remember 100 years ago, there was a climate change thing? What a funny thing, but there were people acting every day to make sure that was just a 20-year event, and it's all over now, and we can just laugh about it. So that would be something that I've like usually in mind, and that's the mission we have. Like, we have this close mission to restore forests, but behind that we have to make sure that fighting against climate change, to make sure that we just laugh about it in a few years.
It's such a nice perspective, actually. And on that statement, I would like really to thank you for joining us. And I would like also, before actually I step close, I would like to ask you if you can share some contact details, how people can find you. If you're going to be in any startup climate event in the current future, so people can also, I don't know, say hi to you there, maybe your LinkedIn profile or in general communication information you would like to share.
Sure. If you want to contact me on LinkedIn, I'm not that fast to reply on LinkedIn, but I always reply at some point. And otherwise, yeah, that would be the best way to reach out. And there will be some events in September. So 11, 12 will be Carbon and Bound in London. And as for me, I think that in September it will be it, but our team will be in New York for the Climate Week in September as well. We'll be in
nice.
the COP16 for biodiversity in Cali. I think it's in October or starting November. And of course, there will be this big event that we know already, which will be the COP30 in Belém in the north of Brazil. But this will be November 2025, but we can see you there.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Exactly.
It has been
already planned.
Great podcast. I really feel like full of motivation and ambition right now, to be honest. And I really got it from you and what you talked about, Morfo.
My pleasure. Thanks, Constantine.